We have finally made it. We have made it all the way to episode 10 of House of the Dragon. And we're here to give our reactions and thoughts. And I say we because I end up reading the chat almost as much as I end up giving my own thoughts. And let's dance. Let's do the thing. The storm clouds broke. Then the storm broke and the dragons danced. One of my favorite lines Grim's ever pinned to paper. And then actually getting to see that illustrated on the screen last night. With Luke going out through the clouds. It looks like he's good to go, and then getting absolutely chomped in half. Let's give a toast to our boy Luke and Arax, his dragon. I hope it's Arax. I hope I'm not messing that up. Let's take a look. Yes. So let's pour one out. Let's pour it out for the homie. This stream is brought to you by Fresca, the Lord Soda. Not really sponsored, and nor do I actually believe it is the Lord Soda, but I do love me some Fresca. So cheers. We made it through season 1 of House of the Dragon. Absolutely wild conclusion. It's good to see you all. It's weird to think that this is the last week they're going to be doing this. I'm going to let people start rolling in through the chat. It's good to see you all. Mitch says, love it or hate it. It cannot be argued that end was a strong conclusion. That sounds like treason to me, Mitch. You can keep your tongue. Bastards or not, they got dragons. Targ enough for me. Fantasy Van says, I'm heartbroken after episode for 2 reasons. 1, no more episodes. 2, Lucerys. Poor Lucerys. Yeah, Luke ends up getting, a bite out of life, a good old chomping good time. Rough. Absolutely rough. Jake is saying, bad visibility. Let's dance Jimbo. Let's do the damn thing, right? Crack that Fresca. You know it. That was an absolute, that was an awesome moment and appropriately gory, says Ben. I would agree. Sally, good to see ya. Rip Lucerys in season 1. Yeah, it's all good, Jake. The names are hard and they are rough to remember at times. You know what I struggle with is the dragon names, but slowly but surely they're getting more embedded into my brain. I've always been more of a people fan in The Song of Ice and Fire, less the dragons. I'm one of those people that really enjoy the dialogue more than the spectacle at times. But the spectacle's winning me over this season. And Books of Genghis Khan says this is the best season 1 he can remember of any show. Wow. Yeah, it definitely feels like we got everything we wanted and a little bit more. There was a lot of pressure coming into this season off of season 8. The weight of that is tremendous. Also, as time passes, more and more people seem to get a little bit more discouraged with A Song of Ice and Fire in general, just because of the wait for Winds of Winter. And there's a lot of things that could have went wrong with this show. I don't think it's a perfect show. I think that there were some hiccups along the way, but without a doubt, my favorite show on television right now, and a clear cut winner for me for best fantasy show. It's really not close for me personally. I am biased, like clearly. But yeah, I just am so happy that it went well. And I felt like after about episode 4, I felt pretty at ease. Like I knew there were other time jumps coming. And once we saw Emma Darcy, we saw Olivia Cook and see the kids grow up and stuff, I was kind of at ease. And these last 2 episodes were interesting from a creative standpoint. We obviously split up the blacks and the greens here in 9 and 10. And I think that that's a pretty bold move. Like the fact that we didn't see Alicent in this final episode or Crispy Cole is weird. It's weird, especially knowing that it's probably going to be 1.5 to 2 years before we see the next season. But I applaud them. They took a lot of risks. They could have kept it pretty tame and not done the time jumps and all these things. But they did them and did them very, very well. So I wonder what the end of the season could have looked like if they had chose a different point to end on. I also wonder what it would have been like if they had mixed the 2 families up for these past 2 episodes where we got the whole cast both times. But I felt like the last 2 episodes were the best paced. And I'd be curious to see what other people felt. I mean, really, episode 8 to me is like the top end. Like that is the best episode of the season for me. But I'd be a liar to say that I didn't feel like 9 and 10 were really, really well paced, especially 9. I feel empty already. What I'm going to do every Sunday. Yeah, we get our hour back, but I'm not sure if I wanted it back. Derry says, I wasn't expecting the dragons being out of control being the thing that kicked off the dance. Well, yeah, I've been seeing this a lot. We're talking about giving dragons agency, which in the books and in the lore, and even in the show here in the first season, they have done a really, really nice job of talking that, we don't actually control these dragons. Viserys said it the best. This is something that men should have never trifled with. And that is echoed throughout this entire season and then really comes into its own at the end where Aemon takes it a little too far. Taking this tormenting of Luke, just one step too far. If he had any kind of foresight, he could have thought, this is probably not going to end well, but he didn't. And also, I like the fact that the dragons are kind of embodying what the writers are feeling. But with that, they don't have the necessary functions to say, okay, this is a good time to stop. And we see this a little bit earlier in the episode too, with like mirroring of emotions. Whenever you see Syrax, I hope I'm saying it right, Syrax, which is Rhaenyra's dragon, whenever she is having a miscarriage and are cutting to her and the dragon screaming and then her screaming while people are around talking about the war that is to come. And if you remember earlier in the season, like one of the reasons why this is so devastating, obviously, other than the point that a child is dying, is the fact that Rhaenyra actually told Alicent she refused to be someone who has babies up in a tower, like locked away in a tower having babies. And she's actually locked in the Dragonstone at that moment, having a baby. While men plot her dynasty, the first move of her queendom. Very interesting. But the dragons really do have more agency than it appears. And that's something that is hinted at, not just in the books, but in the show, because Drogon very much does whatever he wants for the first 7 seasons of Game of Thrones. So the bonding is very ambiguous. And the Targaryens have forgot a lot of what old Valyria knew. I'm very curious if maybe we'll see a dragon horn in the show. Like maybe that'll be a way they start getting the dragons under a little bit of a better control. But I also think at this point, the riders are also going to be extraordinarily reckless and dangerous as well. So it's almost like the riders will be taking on their dragons more so than the dragons, their riders now. I think after this point, chomp, says Cameron. Super Gains Bros, Matt from Bend the Knee, my buddy, my good old pal, says Vhagar is a war criminal. Okay, a war criminal. My guess is season 2 will open up with Jace in the north. Yeah, I said this today, and I'm not sure of this, but I really feel like there's a chance that opening scene for season 2, even though he has to go to the Vale, is just a shot of a dragon coming down through the clouds at Winterfell. And can you imagine the feelings that we're going to get when we see Winterfell again? Even if we know it's coming, we know he's going to be there. We know that the North's going to be somewhat involved. Cregan Stark's going to be dope. But just seeing Winterfell again is going to be an absolute magical moment. Very, very excited. Derek says 2-year wait is heartbreaking. Agreed. Agreed. What madness drove Luke to fly his dragon into Vhagar's mouth? I think he might have had a couple drinks at Storm's End. Oso said, I had this scenario play in my head after Rhaenyra final shot. Tyrion steps out drinking and says, I have grand ideas for you, my grace. If only. That sounds like some fan fiction if I've ever heard it. Alex says Vhagar is a unit. She sure is. Sorry. She sure is. Yeah, Vhagar is a grumpy old grandma that does not have time for any of these young dragons. And we also see Vermithor, which is King Jaehaerys' old dragon. And also we hear about Silverring, which is the good queen's dragon. That's also really, really cool. But man, Vermithor is the 3rd largest dragon behind Balerion and then Vhagar. So we got another big boy ready to rock and roll in the dance. And I wonder who's going to be claiming Vermithor. That's something to look forward to. For sure. Logan, what's up, my friend? He said, in hindsight, maybe Luke was selfish for wanting to keep his eye. I think if he could go back, he would be giving up his eye and getting one of those nifty sapphires. Man, how cool was the sapphire in Aemon's eye? I thought that was just dope. Mrs. Duncan the Tall, always here, always supporting. I appreciate you. Says, book readers, we come on top. We will always have fire and blood. Yeah, and really, the show has taken this into, such a strong direction where they're making the decisions that have remained kind of cloudy from the details of Fire and Blood. And this is very much like a narrative that is saying, hey, this might be what happened in Fire and Blood. I kind of use this example on the Bend the Knee stream, but this is a historical retelling. So just like in real history, if you ask somebody about Julius Caesar, depending on what classroom you're in, what you're citing, what position in the world you are, like where your location is, the narrative of Julius Caesar can change. And that is kind of how I'm looking at the House of the Dragon adaptation. I know there are some changes, also some added details, added scenes, and a lot of character work that isn't in Fire and Blood, and that's okay. I think we can have fun with this. It is a retelling. And what you felt whenever you read Fire and Blood is still absolutely valid. And I think that's what makes this such a fun time, because I don't necessarily feel so attached to Fire and Blood that if they do change things, I'm like, hey, that's not as good. I mean, you could argue that of all the changes in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, the best change is Viserys and the details that they added to Viserys as a king and as a character. Viserys is now an all-timer. Like, I got Bobby beat right back here. I might have to get Viserys over here. I really might. Maybe in his younger days, so it doesn't scare off any viewers. Love Damon's X Factor audition. Tony says, have you read the Rogue Prince short story? I have not. I have not read it in its isolation, but I do plan on doing that here in the off season. Yes, Fantasy Fanatic. Remember Viserys' line in episode 1, the idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. There are power men should have never traveled with. Makes sense now. Yes, and there are many, many parallels and ripplings throughout this entire season. Sorry, the fresco's getting me. That end up coming to a head here in episode 10. We obviously get the parallel scene of Otto, Daemon, and Rhaenyra arriving on a dragon, except this time, instead of coming with Otto, Rhaenyra is coming from Daemon's side, even though she lands her dragon behind. Really cool to see that scene again. I absolutely loved it. Episode 10 is a 2.5 star. Kevin says, can't believe Daemon would choke Rhaenyra. So out of character for him. He's a good guy. Just so everyone's clear, Kevin is trolling. And if you were surprised that Daemon choked Rhaenyra, then I don't know what to tell you. I have no idea. I can't believe this guy who murdered his previous wife would choke his current wife. Character assassinations shake my head. There were a lot of Team Black members that were not pleased. They were not pleased. They were shipping Daemon and ignoring all his atrocities. I mean, the guy, whether you like him or not, I don't care if you like him. I won't make any judgments on that because it's a TV show and you're supposed to have fun. But like to say that would be out of character for him would be a stretch, in my opinion. The guy is, violent. He's the most violent character we've seen in the show so far. And he is a wild card like no other, really. Cyrax sharing Rhaenyra's birth is the first time we've seen that. And if you noticed or not, the child was deformed, more clearly explained in Fire and Blood with dragonish traits. That is why Cyrax was there. So I didn't think that the baby had dragon traits. Obviously, the baby had not formed right because it was early. And I actually saw some people online, like nurses and childcare professionals, talking about how like it actually was a pretty good representation of that type of birth, of stillbirth. I didn't think that there were dragon details on the child, but I could be wrong. I know in Fire and Blood they say there is, but I mean in the show, I didn't see the scales or anything. I was curious if they were going to go with the mushroom account, because the dragon features is a mushroom tail, and we know mushroom likes to stretch that truth as tight as it'll go, right? Joys of being royalty. You can bling out your eye. Yes, you can put a sapphire in there if someone takes it. They cast the Baratheon king to remind us of Bobby B, I think. Oh, definitely. Boros Baratheon was, braggadocious, can't read, which, I mean, that's the ultimate Chad move. It's something I would expect from House Baratheon. Who has time to learn how to read when you're smashing cheeks and smashing skulls? You know what I'm saying? Boros. Yeah, I was very happy with the Boros casting. As you know, I'm a huge Baratheon household fan, and Boros fits the bill. I was very, very happy with that casting. I'm curious about Daemon approaching Vermithor. What's he up to? Well, I think he's going to be taking Vermithor, and he's going to be trying to get someone to ride Vermithor. Vermithor at this point is like 100 years old, and now the second biggest dragon since Balerion the Black Dread is gone. So we'll see. We'll see who ends up on him. Until this episode didn't hit me how big Vagar was. I mean, what about that? What about that shot at Storm's End. I mean, it felt like a Godzilla monster movie. I thought the last 15 minutes were just absolutely incredible. I loved it. I'm glad it wasn't too dark. I was a little worried, because like there's some people like those dark, really, really dark scenes don't work on their TVs. Some people it does. But with this, they kept it very light. I think that they probably had that in mind. Like, we cannot mess this up, especially because the last two episodes were a little bit more like methodical. And this is a major moment. Rainey's was a huge moment, clearly, but like these aren't like red wedding level moments, right? So I feel like they were like, we really have to make sure this is seen and driven home. And Vagar stole the show when he silhouettes above Arax. It was breathtaking and chilling all at once. It really was. Luke in the afterlife. Jace, all your ideas are dumb. Aw. Also, how crap was Lord Baratheon at hosting his envoys? Go back outside and fly through a lightning storm, boy. Can he at least get a coffee? Yeah, I think he felt like there was not going to be a peaceful resolution, so he kind of kicked him out. But if there was one house to buck back against authority, I think the Baratheons make the most sense. But it did strike me, this comment, I kind of did feel that way. I was like, man, the Baratheon, like whether or not he's going to go with Team Green, this is pretty brave, pretty ballsy of Boros. But again, that's kind of the Baratheons. I'm so tempted to go read Fire and Blood ASAP, but I'm way too invested in the show, and I wanted to be surprised at this point. I'll be honest. If you haven't read Fire and Blood yet, I wouldn't. I would just enjoy the show, because especially with what's coming early season 2, if I were you, I would rather experience the show, and I have foresight into this. Fire and Blood's great. I love it. I love a good history book, but I think that experiencing it on the screen for the first time would be an amazing experience. So this is heresy for being a book review channel. I'm going to tell you to just wait it out. Yes, TK says, I mentioned this a little last night in the Bend the Knee show, but foreshadowing the dragon pit with the kids controlling their dragons, and just the foreshadow in general, the season was amazing. Yeah, the dragon pit scene earlier in the season, whenever they have the pink dread, which was still one of my favorite scenes in season 1, really, really played off here. And I kind of said this, there were some episodes where people felt like maybe it was a little bit slow, or things were taking a while to develop, or they felt like a scene, like, why is that scene in there? Did we really need that? I said, there's going to be a lot of stuff we're going to come back to, and we're going to look at this when people are gone and when things change, even later in season 2, 3, 4. And we're going to come back to this first season. And I think that this first season is going to age extraordinarily well. I think we're going to be super impressed with all of the groundwork that was laid out in these about 10 hours of television. And I think what they've accomplished and like the hurdles they overcame will be even more impressive once we get there. And these little scenes like the dragon pit, getting this payoff here in episode 10 for that help enhance that scene. There's things that have happened here in the season 1 that will affect season 4, which is, one of the things that we like about this show. So the physical acting that Emma Darcy did was perfection. Emma Darcy killed it. I thought this was Emma Darcy's best performance, hands down. Think we'll get a retconned Casterly Rock, probably. And then book fans will be furious while I laugh and enjoy it. I don't know. Have you seen how violent Cole is? Yeah, Cole's a psychopath. Cole is like the Ted Bundy of Westeros at this point. He's just out murdering folks. Yeah, I saw some people saying, they felt like Rhaenyra sending out the boys was a bad move. I don't necessarily think it's a good move. Like she's going to regret doing that, like without a doubt. But I do think that it makes sense in this regard because, one, time is of the essence. And these dragons that are being flown out are not big enough for 2 riders. There's even a point where they say Cyrax has to get bigger and then I can take you on a ride. I think Rhaenyra says that earlier in the season. So the dragons aren't big enough. I don't know if dragons just accept like any old Kingsguard to jump on their back either. Obviously we've seen the dragons have a mind of their own. But also, like, time is of the essence. So we can't wait for the ship to get there and then you to protect Luke or Jace. But also, like, the princes need to go and step up because they're about to go to war. Yeah, they're kids, but they're dragon riders. So I think the dragon riders show a piece of respect, right, to these great houses who are trying to bring over to their side. And then on top of that, you have to remember that we've been in a really long peace period, like a century of peace almost, I think, at this point. So even though we obviously see terrible things happen and this is a very dangerous world, I think even though we're on the cusp of war, the people who are getting involved in this have no idea the domino effect that is going to happen and how razor close this really was to breaking out. And also the dragons, like Rhaenyra says, our dragons have never been to war. That tells you that their riders certainly aren't experienced. So I do think Rhaenyra sending her kids is a grave mistake, like literally, but also does make sense for the character to make that bad decision. Ryan, what's up, my friend? He said, when a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin, and we see that kind of cut, like the beginning of that legend happened right here. I mean, Maegor the Cruel was bad, but this is really where the Targs earn their name. I like that Rhaenys saw that Rhaenyra was aiming for peace. Rhaenys is awesome. I was talking to my friend Brandon. He hasn't read the books or anything, but he is watching the show, and he said Rhaenys is my favorite. Said Princess Rhaenys, the best. He's like, I just love her. I love her facial expressions. Her scene with Corlys when she finally lets some tears go. Like, we obviously saw her just be heartbroken whenever she finds out that Laenor is dead, or she thinks he's dead. And to see her with Corlys and the tears run down her face, and then Corlys feeling bad for himself and wanting to give up, and then Rhaenys being like, you're going to get out of that bed and you're going to do the right thing. And it's like, damn, Rhaenys really came to play. Yeah, she did murder a bunch of civilians last week, but she's a Targaryen. So really, really impressed with that actress. Philip says, as an Aemon fan, the change from the book made it easier for me to justify his war crime. Yeah, and it's not necessarily a change, right? It's more details, because the only thing we can say for sure, this is like almost a quote from Fire and Blood, is that we know that Luke died and so did his dragon. They washed up ashore the next day. Whether or not it was an accident, whether or not Mushroom has an account where he says that Aemon stabbed out both of Luke's eyes and then presented it as a prize to Boros's daughter, we weren't sure. All we knew is that the dragons danced and Luke and his died. So I feel like it's an added detail. I think it's fine. I think it makes total sense. I have more of an issue. Like, if I had to nitpick something, I would say I had more of an issue with Alicent thinking that Aegon, like her Aegon, was supposed to be king and not Aegon the Third. Because then, like, you're kind of like, one of the kickstarts to the war happens to be the fact that it's this miscommunication. I think it's important for the show, though, even with that, because we're doing a critiques on not just monarchy, but prophecies, right? And how dangerous they can be. And Alicent obviously trying to fulfill this thing that she kind of has an idea about, but not fully. Even then, though, you can't really say that is what kicks off the Dance of Dragons. I heard Allshift X also say this. He agrees. He doesn't really like that piece, but he said that it's the catalyst for the war. But I don't necessarily agree. I think Aemon's a catalyst for the war. I think Daemon has a lot to do with this war starting. Like, there's a lot of different triggers. But if you remember when Alicent actually goes into the Green Council, even if she didn't say that Aegon was supposed to be king, Otto and them already had a plan in order. Like, Alicent was just along for the ride at that point. It just so happens that she also feels vindicated, thinking that Aegon should sit the throne. So personally, I don't have a problem with the Aemon not being able to control Vhagar. And also, let's remember that Luke couldn't control Arax as well. So I think it's consistent, and definitely, like we've already talked about, Viserys's warnings being echoed throughout the end of the season is really nice. The Baratheon king had a little Bobby B laugh. Yeah, I wish he had a bigger gut, you know? I'm not mad Daemon choked Rhaenyra, but I can't believe he ignored her screaming for him. Bad guy. Yeah, not a great dude. No doubt. My Dragon Baby comment was an if you notice anything strange. I see. Sorry, I misread it. Oh, Logan wants to know, would season 1 of House of the Dragon get the nut button? Of course it does. Come on. I've been having a blast. I'll kind of talk about my overall thoughts of this season and talk a little bit about Game of Thrones and like how we relay these two things, even though I think they're very, very different shows. Yeah. Seeing Storm Zen on the screen. Fantasy Max says, how awesome was it to finally see Storm Zen on screen? Are you kidding? It was amazing. The idea that Storm Zen is like this fist rebelling back against the gods, I thought it was excellent. It's really cool to see a lot of these places in Westeros, and we're going to see more like in their like prime almost, like they're really built up. There hasn't been infrastructure failing yet. Like Jaehaerys has done such an amazing job as king that we're still seeing that prosperity. And it makes it like what we saw in Game of Thrones almost feels like the Dark Ages in a way, doesn't it? Yeah, we definitely relate the Vagar scenes to Godzilla. Yeah, the miscarriage scene was rough. Very, very rough. I thought Damon Deaf was not ignoring Rhaenyra's birthing screams, but was experiencing pain and hoping not to have to relive his last wife's death. I thought it was really important that they showed that Rhaenyra and Damon both were in mourning after the stillbirth, and I think that like that's the little bit of stuff, shreds of hope for Damon as a human being, that we can like still like him even though he does horrendous stuff, and people mourn in different ways. And I think after that, like Damon went even harder into the violence. Like when he gets emotional, it seems like he almost exclusively becomes violent. So it was like a storm building. And then for him not to know the prophecy and Rhaenyra to, be like, oh, you didn't know. It's like, do you got to rub it in? Do you got to rub it in? I wonder if dragon scales conduct electricity. Is flying in a storm really dangerous? I mean, even if it doesn't, I still think it's probably not your best move, right? And just remember, I usually put up a banner. I'm actually going to put it up now. Don't spoil anything that would maybe come up in later seasons. We're going to keep everything contextualized to this first season, first 10 episodes of House of the Dragon in the chat, and for what I talk about. Yeah, first season was absolute fire. And season 2, as Matt says, is going to also be in Fuego. It's going in Fuego. Is it in Fuego? Yeah, we'll go with that. It's going to be awesome. Really, really excited. I think that a lot of the hard parts are out of the way, and I'm glad that they're going to slow down just a little bit. And I hope we do all 4 seasons, and I hope they take their time. I really do. I do not want, I would rather have a show be a little bit slow than waste any of the big dramatic moments. And I want more dialogue, specifically from Otto Hightower. Pedro says Luke survives and will spend the rest of his life as an amnesiac fisherman. Right. Hey, Fire and Blood says it's possible. They were pretty wimpy looking children. Seed not strong, ironically. Well, they're Targaryens. I don't know what this strong business is. I heard one comedian say Luke has a Power Wheels dragon. Oh, man. I also finally feel like we got the sea snake I was expecting from Fire and Blood in this episode. Yeah, let's be honest. When Corlys comes back, I don't know about y'all, but that was a fist pumping moment. Only to be, it would have been like one of my favorite moments of the episode, like maybe the most like awe inspiring, had it not been for the crowning of Rhaenyra. When Eric brings the crown, everyone bends the knee. Rhaenys is in the back, kind of staring ahead, obviously waiting to see what she'll do with the news of the war. Man, the crowning, like Aegon's coronation, like even though I'm not necessarily like a big fan of Team Green, I thought it was dope, especially with all the symbolism and stuff. Like Allison got me. She got me a little bit with the green propaganda there, without a doubt, or the Targaryen propaganda. But seeing Rhaenyra be crowned and like knowing that she's Viserys' daughter and the one that he really wanted to be crowned, and to see Daemon do his thing. Like for some reason, when Daemon takes the knee, right, and kind of like puts someone else forth, even though for him, I think a lot of this is just like symbolic. Like he's going to follow the rules, but he wants to take charge. Like he's ready to get down to business. But seeing him do that and take second place, and to be a little bit humble, there's something that it adds to the scene. But Rhaenyra being crowned is one of the moments that gave me chills this season, and one of my favorite shots of House of the Dragon so far. Oh, I was impressed with the writing too. They clearly saw the Twitter fallout about the dragon pit death. It's one of the first lines in the episode. It's not my war to start. Yeah, Rhaenys, I think, explained herself very well. I think she acted consistent with her actions. At this point, I think the only thing that you could be mad at with the dragon pit scene, I mean, if you're like actually coming into it with good faith, is that you could be mad that she killed a bunch of civilians. But I think that that is makes more than enough sense considering that she's royalty. Oh gosh, I just remembered Rainey's speech from episode 1 about the tournament where we don't have a real battle test at night, just people filled with anger, and Seed was a huge setup speech I missed. Yeah, I mean, and remember in that tournament episode 1, we see people like, I mean, they're just it's nonsense. Like they're killing each other and people are mad about that. Um, but it does illustrate the point that these people are almost bloodthirsty and they don't even know how to go to war at this point. I thought Rhaenyra was going to tell Rhaenys that they didn't kill her son to ensure she'd come to her aid. Why wouldn't they at this point in secret? So here's why. Because if Rhaenyra, right now, there's at least the pieces that Rhaenyra can say, I had no hand in your son's death, and she can be telling the truth. I think it might even go worse if Rhaenyra were to say, hey, Rhaenys, I duped you and I sent your son across the narrow sea with his boy toy and I lied to you about the death and made you experience that. And now you have to know that he's somewhere out there and you will never, ever see him again. Like, I think that that's, you're kind of like, once you've stuck with the lie, I don't think you can come back from it. I actually think it'll get worse. It would be worse in some ways. Yeah, Sea Smoke has some roles to play for sure. Dookie Shoe says, I was upset about the change with Amen at first, but now I can buy that he was just trying to give him a scare. It still works. Yeah. I think it's fine. And again, it's not necessarily a change as much as it is new details, right? Okay, so Aster said she did think she saw some dragon deformities on the baby. I'll have to like zoom in and enhance in 4K and see if I can see anything. Her speech has so many parallels to the Green Kids, one with anger issues and one who just wants to be left to his vices. Excited to see Kermit and Grover next season. House of the Muppets is coming. That's the real spinoff that we need, right? Oh, you're all good, Oso. Don't worry about it, brother. No problem. Okay, Oso says, with the end of the first season, do you feel the time jumps worked in the end or still rushed the build up too much? So this is something that me and Matt kind of talked about. And I have seen some people say they feel like this doesn't equal like the climax of other seasons of Game of Thrones. And I have a couple different thoughts about this, and I'll try not to forget anything as I start rambling. But one, and I'm going to do it, and we're all going to do it, and we're going to continue to compare this to Game of Thrones. But I think that it's kind of futile, and I think it's kind of silly also. I think it's fine to like draw parallels and talk about the differences of the show, but to expect a 1-for-1 or to stick with the formula of like episode 9 being the big climax and 10 being the fallout. This is a different show with different showrunners. Some of the writers are different, but also it's a different type of narrative. This is not the same at all as Game of Thrones. So them breaking away from that episode 9 being the biggest epics thing formula is totally fine. My feeling is Matt actually wanted it to go a little bit further, which I can understand. And I've seen a couple other people say this, and I'm not going to say what events they want because of spoilers, but I actually said, hey, wouldn't it have been kind of cool if Viserys's last episode was episode 10? Just because like, I don't think they realized what they had with Patty. Like Patty, I think they knew he was doing a good job. George obviously was really impressed. But the thing is, I don't think anybody expected the masses to latch on to Viserys's character like this and become one of the all-time like most loved characters in Westeros. And just I mean, the dude deserves the Emmy. Give it to him. But I think knowing that now, and this isn't a critique on the show. This is just something I'm playing with in my head now that I have the context of all of season 1 and how it went. It almost makes me wish that, remember the Harrenhal episode where Larys kills his family, right? And Lena dies. And we felt like that last 15 minutes was like really rushed, even though we liked like kind of where it went. We felt like it was a little bit rushed. So it makes me wonder if that episode could have been maybe split into 2 episodes, and then you let some things stretch out, right? And then you end at Viserys's death. Like you fill 2 episodes with the Harrenhal stuff, maybe get a little bit more Harwin Strong in there, get a real attached to him before he goes, and then you end the season episode 10 with Viserys dying. I think that would have been like an oh shit moment for sure. And then I also do see why some people wishes that it would have went a little bit further, and maybe we saw the fallout from the Greens as well. Like I can see that being a critique. My only thing about it is like I don't want it to go any faster than it already has. And we know that the time jumps felt, not jumbled. Time jumps are never good. they're very rarely something we love. But they leaned into it and got through it. So even at times where it felt jarring, like we got through it and it was fine. But yeah, I think there was some stuff that was a little too rushed for sure. And I also like, there are questions of like, which scenes are going to pay off later. Like for instance, Vermithor and Daemon probably took up like 3 minutes of runtime, maybe 5 minutes. And Vermithor is obviously going to be like in the future seasons, like someone's going to have to ride that dragon. But I kind of wondered why we were there at that point. And another thing that the only other thing in the episode I didn't necessarily like, I don't want to use the word like, but I question why we went there in the finale, is whenever Daemon takes Jace and says, let me show you real loyalty, and basically threatens the Kingsguard with Caraxes, which was a dope scene. But at the same time, I was just like, I don't know. It's such a weird way of illustrating it. Like, I don't know if I love that. So like I said, this show is not perfect, but I think it's great. I still think it's great. But yeah, I do think they could have maybe slowed it down just a little bit. Oh, yeah. Talking about the Corlys moment that we spoke of earlier, Derry says it was a great moment for Corlys when he comes to the war room and just owns the space. Suddenly you realize how uncertain they'd all been to that point. He brought true leadership. And I love like the immediate effect he has for him saying, I'm going to shut down these trade routes. The Lannisters ain't got shit on us. And also the fact that Daemon just happened to not be in the room. Good touch. Very, very good touch. And he knew what was going on. Eric is the superior brother. Yeah, the brothers being on opposite sides was really subtle and kind of heartbreaking, even already before the blood starts to shed, huh? Ryan says the showrunners wanted to start this show with episode 10 and go forward from there. Gurm wanted them to set it up the way they did this season. What are your thoughts if they had run it their way? I think, yeah, Ryan, this is something that I think is like really important to think about. For people who maybe didn't like the time jumps or wanted it to be done a little bit differently, like how would you feel if we started now instead of at the Great Council with Jaehaerys, that flashback where Viserys gets crowned? For me personally, I think the show needed to build up. I think you would have had to do so much explaining of why these characters are the way they are without them looking cartoonishly evil. And all of the happenstance, mistakes, miscommunications, bad choices all add into this really interesting, convoluted, like layered cake that mirrors real life. People make terrible decisions all the time. Mistakes happen. Communications get mixed up. You say the wrong thing when someone else is, time and time again, that's how life is. It's hard stuff to think about. And you make mistakes. Aemon made a mistake. He did the classic take it too far for revenge. Like your brother of a pinching, you punch him in the mouth. All of a sudden you're in trouble. Same thing, obviously on a nuclear level. So yeah, I think that it was the best decision to make to set this up. And this season's a prologue, in my opinion. So the prologue is now finished and the dance shall begin. Oh yeah, we finally got House Celtigar Bartimos on the Black Council. Yeah, pretty sweet. I love how this show makes me care for the Kingsguard. Yes, and also Daemon mentioning the fact that he has contacts in King's Landing from the Gold Cloaks were really, really cool. Or the City Watch. When Eric showed up, I call him Eric and Eric. Eric showed up. I was waiting for someone to ask which of the brothers he was. That'd have been funny. Tony says, I've really enjoyed these weekly live streams. Thanks for doing them. Hey, I appreciate all you guys checking this out. And, House of the Dragon's going to have more news. There's going to be casting, all kinds of crazy stuff. And there's also some stuff that we can think back on, right? I'm probably going to rewatch the season, and I'm going to be doing all of that over at Bend the Knee, which is a YouTube channel, but also a podcast. You can download the episodes anywhere. We're going to be ranking our top 5 moments from the seasons, maybe our top 2 or 3 things we wish that were just a little bit different. And then we're also going to have some episodes. We're not going to mix them up, but we're going to have spoiler episodes for those who have read Fire and Blood and want to see our thoughts on where they're going to go and like maybe where season 2 will end. So definitely go check out Bend the Knee here on YouTube, but also anywhere that you get podcast. I'm going to be talking House of the Dragon and A Song of Ice and Fire every single week there with my good friend Matt, and I'm pumped for it. So what will we do now on Sundays? Rewatch. Darius says, I'm not comparing it to Game of Thrones. I'm loving what I'm getting from a fabulous show based on a different book with a different feel. They're nailing it. Yeah, and I do think it does feel different for sure. Ben says, I think I'm with you on ending the season with Viserys' death for maximum impact. Patty was the heart of the season. Yeah, and it was hard to come back from that, especially splitting up the episode. In a way, splitting up the cast over 2 episodes actually kind of like, it's an interesting thing because we get more time with the grief of Patty, I call him Patty, Viserys passing, right? We get to relive the moment where the knowledge becomes known twice. So in a way, actually pays a lot of respect to that character. And also lets us not forget how ridiculously impactful of a moment this is. And then also kind of distracts us from the fact that Patty's no longer around. I have a feeling they had no idea what they had with Patty Constantine. Yeah, I think a lot of people will be happy if this moves a little bit slower. What percent into the book was the episode 10 ending? I would say we're through and I don't know, someone's going to tell me I'm wrong because they can go count the pages off the top of my head. I think we're like maybe 20, 25% way through the dance. Like really the setup is like here and now. And from here on out, like there's a lot of battles, like a lot. TK says, I would have been happy if they slowed down in Aegon's crowning it. Then episode 1 of season 2 was what we got in episode 10. Yeah, I could see that for sure. Fantasy Fanatic says, when the map lit up, my God, dude, Dragonstone's so sick. And then the map table lighting up was a highlight of the season for me. I loved it. Maybe not the highlight, but one of the major ones for me. Ryan Turbush says, I believe they showed us Vermithor's scene to give the fans of the Blacks hope for the future seasons, given what they showed us of Vhagar. Actually, I like that a lot. That's a really good point, Ryan. I even mentioned how Vermithor is the 3rd biggest dragon of all time, 2nd behind Vhagar, or 3rd behind Vhagar, really. Living right now is the 2nd biggest. So yeah, you know what, Ryan? You're right. In a way, it's kind of like their big A-bomb, right? Because I just look at these as thermonuclear dragon dogs. I mean, that's really kind of what they are, right? Series on TV were 12 episodes, now 10 and often 8. Yeah, and I remember when Oz had like a 26 episode season back in the day. Kevin Walsh says, end of the first episode, Rhaenyra turns around, the weight of being the first queen heavy on her shoulders. End of the finale, she turns around determined and ready to go to war. Cool parallel. And also another parallel we have to think is that we actually get the shot of her face, just like we got a shot of her face in episode 1. And on top of that, it's sad, but she loses a mother and a brother in episode 1, right? And then she loses both of her she loses not all of her children, obviously, but 2 children. She loses Luke and then Visenya, who was the stillborn. And it's pretty damn bleak. It's pretty damn brutal. And seeing her kind of take the reins a little bit back from Daemon, with even just that look. Like, I think Daemon also knew it was going to break her heart, but do you think there's a piece of Daemon that was happy? Not happy, but like, you know what I mean? Like, he's like, now she will have to go to war. Like the infighting is now over. Kind of curious to see how Daemon handles that news in the next season. Jake has a good, he kind of clears this up when we talked about how far into Fire and Blood are we in the show. He says the season was an adaptation of one chapter of Fire and Blood, which is about 50 pages. The chapter was called Heirs of the Dragon, a question of succession. That's correct. Seeing the table lit up makes me wish they had that for Game of Thrones. Could we do a George Lucas type deal? Can he go back and add some CGI in there? Cameron says, my girlfriend is not a fan of, I assume it's Game of Thrones and hasn't read the books, but loved House of the Dragon. Really great how accessible they made the show plot through this right family drama for the first season, hype for the dance. Yeah, I think it's been done very, very well. I know a lot more people who are not book fans than I do. Like, obviously, I have all of you, and there's literally thousands of people who come to my channel and talk about this stuff over time. But I did not have this many casual fans around me, like everyday people who aren't into the books and don't know all the lore. Uh, there's just so many more of them now than whenever I was watching Game of Thrones because I was a lot more secluded. So it's interesting seeing how well people are picking up on subtle details. Like, I think I'm gonna have to explain more than I need to them. And sure, like Vermithor, like they might mess up the dragon names. Hell, I mess up the dragon names, but I think they're doing a nice job of putting the breadcrumbs there. But and some of the stuff is on the nose, without a doubt. Like especially some of the themes. But I'm not totally opposed to that. But there's also a lot of subtleties that the fans are picking up on. And I think that this is a show that is going to be a lot of fun to rewatch, guys. Like, I can't believe it's only been 5 weeks since we saw Millie Alcock. Like, I forgot about the young cast. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. It's just that it feels like with all the time covered, I really did live 15 years in this universe. Gosh, I cannot wait to go back and rewatch this season. It's going to be so good. I rewatched yesterday. The nod from Rhaenyra to Daemon before Vaemon's beheading isn't in the episode. I remain open to the idea that Viserys was hallucinating the friendliness of the dinner. Okay, yeah. The nod gate was big, and I definitely perpetuated that. So it is my apologies. I thought it was in the episode, and I was wrong. So Oso says, in my opinion, in the end, I'm very satisfied with the course of the show, but I can still understand the feelings with time jumps rushing things. That said, I like the view of this season being a prologue. Yeah, and like I said, I think that this season's going to age very, very well, especially with where we end up. It's going to be wild that we even skipping 15 years in season 1, we're going to still feel like, wow, we covered even more ground in the later seasons, which is crazy. Bruno says, I fail to find words to describe how beautiful Rhaenyra's coronation scene was. Considering all she had been through, she didn't have had the right to mourn her father's death and was the victim of a coup. Yeah, I mean, it felt like she was getting what she deserved with the crowning and overcoming a lot of the stuff that she certainly, in my opinion, did not deserve. This is the cannibal erasure for biggest ranking. Shake my head. Vermithor is the third base dragon who has ever had a rider in Westeros history. Yeah, cannibal. I guess we could talk about that. That's fine. Yeah, so cannibal eats other dragons. Yeah, I feel like that. I don't want to go into that too much, which is kind of why I stumble through the rankings because I don't want to mention some stuff. Sally says episode 8 is one of the best episodes I've ever seen in the last 5 years. And this is coming from someone who wasn't a big fan of King Viserys. How dare you not be a big fan of King Viserys? How dare you? I'm just kidding. No, I think that episode 8 of House of the Dragon, of all television, is like one of my favorite episodes ever. As good as any Game of Thrones episode, in my opinion. Look at Game of Thrones in terms of how radical the focus shift was between the first and second season. And also in popularity. Think about it. Game of Thrones really picked up in season 3 and 4, and then it was off to the races in 5, 6, and 7. And then, I know everyone hates 8, but when you look at the numbers that they did, it's insane. So this is the biggest finale, and this is just the night of, like, it'll probably end up being like 20 or 30 million people watching, but it was like 10 point something million people watched last night at 9:00, which is the biggest finale they've had since season 8 of Game of Thrones, which did I think 21 million, like at 9:00. That's insane. So this is already getting up there, with it's already one of HBO's most successful projects, even after a season. So as far as numbers, ratings, money goes, we're Gucci gang. Here's a wild theory. The biggest and baddest creature in the show won't be Vhagar or Vermithor, but the cake-eating pug in episode 3. What about the pink dread? Huh? Emma Darcy has said Rhaenyra is experiencing visceral grief for the first time and losing Luke. Yeah, I really like what Emma Darcy had to say after the episode. Emma Darcy went on to talk about how sometimes we feel like we have actually conquered grief, and sometimes that we feel like we've had all the grief that can be had, and then it is always a stranger whenever it hits, and it can always catch us off guard and always overtake us. And you never get used to grief. Even when you think that you know grief, it could always be worse. And it was really, really powerful for Emma Darcy to say that on the post episode. And I feel like out of all of the cast, other than Patty, I think Rhaenyra or Emma Darcy playing Rhaenyra is the one who understands their character the most. I really do. How far away the crab feeder seems to be. Remember that guy? Remember people were mad that he got killed off so quick? Jimmy, do you think making Team Black sympathetic is a psyop to justify the rejection riots around the... No, Mitch, shut up. God. It was a public holiday in New Zealand. Show released at 2 p.m. Monday here, and it broke our internet with all the people trying to watch it as it released instead of after work, as it had been all season. Yo, getting this kind of thing at 2 o'clock would be wild to me. That's I'm sorry to hear that. So that's rough. I do think that the power of media, and I talk about this in books all the time, but the power of also seeing something on screen that is very real, and that's like one of the reasons why Game of Thrones is very successful. That all the Dance of Dragons and the White Walkers and stuff. There's also like really intimate, personal, human things going on in these shows, and it is grotesque sometimes with the way that it's explored. I think House of the Dragon's actually done a really, really great job. But not pulling punches. Some people would claim it's a spectacle. And I get into this debate with people about Berserk as well. I think whenever you take the time to really look into how some of these things take place, or show that tragic moment, right? Like the stillbirth, for example. Like some people are like, that is too far, it's too disgusting. But it's like, is it paying homage to the despair and the weight of something like that? And you can do it without showing all the details, but there are some people that resonates with whenever it's shown. So yeah, there is a spectacle piece of it. And I'm not saying anyone has to like it, but like these shows do tend to hit home a lot more often because of their unflinching approach to the display of it on screen. And it can be really, really tough. Really, really tough. I would not be sad if they put up warnings prior to episodes. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. But like, for instance, Berserk is a very brutal manga. But I know people who have went through a lot of the stuff that is displayed on paper in Berserk in graphic detail, and they say this helped me overcome what I experienced. Like for the first time, I felt like someone wasn't afraid to finally say what happened. That someone wasn't like everyone says, "Oh, we don't talk about that," and it's like someone finally talked about it, and it actually helped them. I think it's called exposure therapy, or at least a form of it. And again, I'm not saying this has to work for everyone. I'm not saying that you have to be subjected to these things, but it just doesn't surprise me whenever I see people who actually take away something that's like really personal and meaningful from these type of shows. So that's the difference, right? Like it's a difference in A Song of Ice and Fire too, is there's a lot of really real shit that gets explored. So yeah, for sure. Heart goes out to you, so for sure. Bruno says Viserys' entrance to the throne room is one of the most impactful and powerful scenes I've seen on television. It tops Tyrion's confession, Jon becoming king, and Daenerys giving birth, I'd say. I totally agree. Honestly, I would take Viserys in the throne room over all of those that you mentioned. I really would. Though Jon becoming king is so sick. King of the North. Hut D is a family drama that happens to have dragons. Family dramas highlight and exaggerate the reality of situations. The sense of being seen is incredibly valuable. Yeah, it absolutely is. And, it's important. It's important to talk about these things and to display them for sure. Kev, not what you think. He says, Jon becomes king. What the fuck? No, it's not how you think. Not how you think. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I missed. I know I'm not going over every single little thing in the episode, but I just really want to come on and just, kind of celebrate the fact that season 1 was a success and that we had a great time and we got to do these weekly streams, which is really, really cool. I absolutely loved season 1. I think overall, I'm feeling a good, generous 9 out of 10 for my arbitrary rating. I would put it somewhere in, that season 1 to 2 of Game of Thrones, like a level of enjoyment and whatnot. It's hard to compare them. Like I said earlier, like Game of Thrones season 1 is much slower, but I think it's a lot more consistent, but it had way less to contend with. Had no weight on its shoulders, really, for a season 1 of a new show. I mean, of course you want to get renewed, but it's almost like for what House of the Dragon overcame with the time jumps and everything, like I almost want to give it the nod. Like you have to acknowledge the challenge and for the challenges that they had and then what we got from it. And then even independent of that, it's so great, but it's also such a different thing than the season 1 of Game of Thrones because a lot more shit happens because it had to. So rewatchability factor high. Ryan says, still waiting for a comment from King Bobby B behind you. He is in awe and he is speechless at Boros and just seeing his ancestors on screen. There was tears running down his face yesterday. It's all right, man. Hey, real men cry. He's being a bit shy. Kind of glad Hot D is over. Now time for more Malazan content. Yeah, I will say, these have taken a lot of bandwidth to do. Being live, making sure I'm doing the right things. I didn't do pictures tonight, honestly, because I didn't have time. I have a super busy week ahead of me. But I am kind of excited to kind of reflect on the season. I'm obviously going to be doing stuff over on Bend the Knee every single week for Song of Ice and Fire and House of the Dragon. But I'm also excited to get back to your regular scheduled programming with a lot of book reviews and other stuff. But this has been great. These streams opened up the idea of doing the solo chatting with nuts that I really enjoyed. I gave it a shot and it was extremely successful, which is great. And Social Teist, good point. The massive success gives me hope for other spinoffs, to be honest. So one thing I want to say about this is my hope is that they do not run a Westeros show in tandem with another one ever, unless if it's like the final season of one and then one starting up. I don't want what Star Wars has, like, or Marvel rather, where like they're running multiple ones in 1 year. I know that sounds weird, but I think that this is like a universe that you have to let breathe a bit because you do not want to desensitize the audience to the universe. And part of the appeal to Westeros is how, absolutely brutal it is. But if we're seeing it week in and week out, it could be a little bit much, and I don't want to burn it out. I think there's plenty of stories to tell in this universe. I think that Dunk and Egg could segue into Blackfire Rebellion, which would be sick. So I think we could take it slow. And I do believe that Dunk and Egg could be like a massive show. Like it could go from an episode. I am burping. This fresca is killing me. It's making me burp so much. We could go from an episodic kind of buddy cop type of thing with Dunk and Egg and unfolding into something much, 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 much larger for like Blackfire Rebellions and stuff. And we could see all of Westeros. And it would be such a different show, different feel. Kind of like House of Dragon, is different from Game of Thrones. So I embrace the Westerosi universe, cinematic universe, but I also hope that they don't overdo it in the sense of rushing to get everything out. And then obviously the Snow Show is a huge gamble that I am all for because it doesn't cost me a damn dime really, other than my HBO subscription I'm going to keep anyways. So like for me, I know some people are like, we don't want it with the Snow Show, but like, why not try it? Like, I don't know. Who knows? It could be good. I will never judge a show before I see it. So costs me nothing to watch it. I can't wait for Viserys portrait to show up so he and Bobby B can have combos during episodes and chats. I got to get my my artist on making me a Viserys one for sure. Yeah, thank you guys for being here so much. I really, really appreciate it. This is going to be fun coming back in maybe 2 years. I'll be even older. Oh my God. I'll have less hair probably. Also says, I hope they eventually do that Empire of Ash show where they show the Doom. I would love if they showed the Doom. For sure. Bruno says, "Oh God, I completely agree with one series at a time. Otherwise, we get franchise fatigue." And I also want the Aegon the Conqueror show. Yeah, and like if you think about it, so if House of the Dragon runs 2 years in between, so you have like let's just say 6 to 8 years for House of the Dragon, even though it's only 4 seasons. Like that's almost a decade before you get another one. So I think you could spread it out with even just the published material George has. You could be looking at 20 years of content without until you start have to embellishing new stuff, right? Like the ET show and all that other stuff. 10,000 ships of Nymeria could be dank. So I see decades and decades and decades of Westerosi content. I think it's always going to be around, even long after we're all gone, as morbid as that is. And I'm also going to miss this weekly routine. I've had a lot of fun doing these. I want to thank you guys so much for showing up to these each and every week. Our viewership for these actually went up each week, which is the exact opposite of what happens whenever you do a spoiler chat about anything. The further you go into a series, the less people can watch it because the less people stick with stuff. So the fact that this has been successful and has grown is really special to me. And I love you guys so much. Drop a like on this video if you can. It does help people find it after the fact. I'm sure there's going to be people scrambling to find more House of the Dragon content. And please go subscribe to the Bend the Knee YouTube channel and subscribe to the podcast feed. We generally will post a full episode on the podcast feed, and then we will chop it up and put it up on the Bend the Knee YouTube in case you can't listen to the whole episode. And also, we usually record those episodes live on YouTube. So we go live on YouTube, and then that is the podcast episode. So you can get notifications for that. I'm going to keep talking House of the Dragon. I'm going to keep talking Sound of Ice and Fire with my good friend Matt, and it's going to be a blast. So I'm telling you, there's a lot more coming. And Kev, thank you. He says, I'm here more for you than the spoiler talk. I appreciate that, man. Thank you. But you should be here for George because he's awesome. So that's all. That's it. We've wrapped it up. It's awesome. I appreciate you. And we made it. We made it through season 1. And we'll be back in 2 years. And if I'm still alive, I'll cover it again. But until I see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.